Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology, conformément à l'ordre.
Pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, October 5, 2022, Bill C-244, an act to amend the Copyright Act, diagnosis, maintenance, and repair. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of Thursday, June 23, 2022. To begin this study, we have first the MP from Richmond Centre, Wilson Milne, and you have the floor concerning this bill for 5 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the members of Indu Committee for allowing me to appear today to speak on my private member's bill, Bill C-244, an act to amend the Copyright Act for the purpose of diagnosis, maintenance, and repair. It is my honor to see this bill pass unanimously in the House, and I would like to take a moment to thank everyone who supported this bill and allow this bill to be discussed and studied here today in the Standing Committee. This bill was previously tabled in the last Parliament by the member of Cambridge, now the Parliamentary Secretary to Ministry of National Defence. Thank you. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank him for his work. It's important to recognize the significance of this bill and understand the potential that will benefit all consumers across Canada. I cannot stress the impact that this bill has for Canadians and our consumers and our environment. The Copyright Act as it stands today is being interpreted in areas beyond its scope. Bill C-244 addressed the concerns that is becoming more frequent in today's world. We're seeing more digital products integrated into our daily lives and rely upon for our everyday services. At the same time, the actual lifespan of electronics has reduced dramatically with planned obsolescence, leading to more costs for consumers and more burden to our environment. Copyright exists to protect the intellectual property and the original work of its creator, and not preventing the right to repair even when nothing is being copied or distributed. But in the current Copyright Act, it contains certain clauses that make it impossible or extremely difficult for anyone to legally repair the product, preventing any repairs from happening at all. As a result, Canadians would not be able to seek for repair alternatives and would face the dilemma of throwing out their new purchase because of a small malfunction or damage to a product. As technology is becoming more sophisticated, technological protection measure, or TPMs, are usually come in the form of a technical restriction built in like a barrier to prevent access to the original work, just like a digital lock, an encryption, or even a custom screw, which can be found in many products, like heavy machineries from tractors to electric scooters, to everyday devices from mobile phones to health devices that save human lives. These are just a few examples of the many products that has a TPM incorporated. But there is a certain exemption. Just like the Canadian Automotive Service Information Standard, a voluntary agreement reached in 2009 in the automotive industry, ensuring automakers and aftermarket provider provide access to service and repair information to repair facility across Canada. Any circumvention to a TPM is prohibited and would be considered illegal, and this bill ensures that any circumvention for the sole purpose of diagnosing, maintaining, and repairing a product will not violate the Copyright Act. In order to address the limitation of the Copyright Act in Canada now, Bill C-244 would change the definition of a technological protection measure by applying it to the software and computer programs within the product, allowing consumers to circumvent a TPM only for the sole purpose of diagnosis, maintenance, and repair, giving back controls to our Canadian consumers. This bill is important because it is one part of the federal responsibility that must be addressed before any right of repair legislation exists across Canada. Bill C-244 does not rewrite the Copyright Act, but without this change, any other legislation or regulatory changes will not have their desired effect and TPMs cannot be bypassed for repair. That means anyone who decided to circumvent a TPM now could face legal consequences. It is time to put a measure control back to our Canadians, and Canadians should have the right to repair. And with this, we're able to promote a greener future by reducing waste to our landfill and extend lifespan of a product. I look forward to hearing your comments and answers, anyone you might have, and I like to say I'm very happy to discuss any amendment moving forward to prevent unintended consequence and ways to strengthen the sustainability and efficacy of the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Miao, much appreciated. And to start the discussion, we'll go to MP Williams for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd first want to start by thanking Mr. MP Miao for bringing this forward. Certainly, we can all agree that a circular economy, one where we can have as many businesses competing as possible, is a great thing. A few questions for you, sir, this morning. We're going to start with warranties. So you do talk about circumvention of TMPs and wanting to make sure that companies can get around that, the Copyright Act. But how do we work around warranties where a company has a warranty on a product, and if there's a tamper or if there's any circumvention of that they can void that warranty? So have you thought about that in this bill, and what can we do about that?
Yes, thank you for your statement and comments, and of course your questions. You know, with regards to warranty, this brought up yesterday actually from a constituent of mine asking and telling me the importance of this bill, because recently he purchased a Microsoft Surface Pro, and somehow it got damaged. Within warranty period, he brought it back to the shop, and Microsoft decided not to, grant that warranty because there's signs of tampering the actual laptop. With that regards, I feel, as long as consumer is able to find options to repair at a facility, not necessarily an authorized facility, but through a technician that knows what to do, these are the right of the consumers for them to carry out. And at the same time, these are works for the manufacturer to determine whether or not there would be further amendments to the warranty that they provide to the consumers, so that the lifespan of the product can be also extended as well.
So, Ms. Miao, I guess I'm looking at it in terms of perhaps what the U.S. have done, because they have some legislation, and what we can do in Canada. Would that be something we have to do under the Copyright Act, or is that something else we're going to have to look at in terms of, I'm going to say for two sides of this. One is looking at warranties and what legal protections that manufacturers have under warranty, and then two, enforcement. So how do we enforce that either the law to change that would allow a third party to go under a warranty for a competitor or for a company? And the example I'm going to give is Tesla right now is known in the U.S. for not allowing others to work on it, but also there's no enforcement. So when Tesla doesn't allow others to work on their systems, it's not followed, and there's no enforcement or no penalty for people that go around that.
So with regards to that part, I would say warranty usually falls under the Consumer Protection Act. And without this bill being brought forward, then other legislation could not come into place. Because in any ways of a warranty situation or not a warranty situation, a technological protection measure is being accessed for the purpose of the repair. The limitation comes with certain exceptions, and these exceptions can also be brought forward and discussed moving forward after this.
And I think it's valid, and I think it does the first step. I'm not so sure, though, in this bill that we get around that. I think that's still going to exist. However, I think in the circular economy that there's going to be third parties that can work outside of warranty. So I think there's certainly a part of the circular economy that could look at something, a cell phone or a car outside of warranty and be able to still fix that. I think this bill does it. I'm just not sure if we get around the warranty when it is in warranty, just because of the legal ramifications. Second question I have is, have we looked at our major trading partners, so the U.S., Mexico, and the EU? Is this bill in line with CUSMA and with CETA?
So with regard to any related to the CUSMA agreement, there are certain prohibitions that is put forward right now to not allow technological protection measure to be circumvent. And across globally right now, U.S., many states, I believe 20 states in the U.S. right now, have a right to repair framework legislation being discussed or developed, and also as well as EU and our trading partners in Australia. These are important issues to be discussed and studied upon once the part of the Copyright Act is amended, and any exception coming forward can be also considered as an amendment further to strengthening the legislation in the right to repair framework.
Through the chair, to Mr. Millaud again, do we have any numbers on the markets which this bill will affect, current market numbers, potential growth for third-party electronics repair and servicing, and do we have current market numbers for OEM repair and servicing? So do we know the economic potential of this bill so far?
I don't actually have those numbers with me, but definitely in the OEM market and also the aftermarket parts market industry, there are demands of accessing certain parts and information to support the manufacturers or the producers to help with the repair.
Okay, and last question, Mr. Chair.
Briefly,
you did mention
and a brief answer.
You did mention that states are making these laws in the U.S. We have provinces also passing legislation. How is this bill going to work with the provinces?
So from my understanding, there are some previous legislation at the provincial level that was carried out. However, both most of them got fall fruit because of the limitation towards circumvention of a TPM.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to MP Erskine Smith for 6 minutes.
Thanks very much, and great job bringing this bill back to us, and I hope we can strengthen it where possible. I want to start simply. What do you see as the sectors that will be most impacted by legislation like this?
So I think this bill will affect every sector across the nation because with how our technology advanced today, there are a lot more electronics products that is an option for consumer to choose from. At the same time, these electronic products consist of many restrictions to access, which I have mentioned a TPM that will limit the access for consumer to the sake of not allowing intellectual property or the work of its original creator to be accessed. But at the same time, it limits the right for consumer to repair.
And we are going to hear, I am sure, perspectives strongly in support of the legislation through our review of the bill. I expect we might hear some concerns. You as the sponsor and obviously working closely with Brian May, who originally brought it to us in the last Parliament, what do you see as the core objections, and how do you think we can best respond to them?
So the intention of this amendment to the Copyright Act is to allow, I wouldn't call it a small part, but an important part of the right to repair framework. Because without this being carried forward, any repair done is considered illegal as for any consumer or third party to do repairs. So before we can discuss about other legislation related to this scope, this part is critical to move forward so that any circumvention of the TPM is not considered illegal here in Canada.
And of the organizations you have consulted and obviously engaging with MP May, who'd done his own consultation on this, are there organizations that you think we should be inviting that would be in support of the legislation? And on the other side, are there organizations that have raised concerns with you that we will want to address?
Thank you for that, because I believe in the second hour of today's meeting, there will be several witnesses that will be appearing, including Global Automaker of Canada, AIA Canada, I believe also the Associate Equipment Distributor, some of which I have spoken to, and they have raised some of their concerns regarding issues surrounding the industry. However, I have to say, any industry that have consideration under the right to repair framework, it's thinking from the perspective of supporting more benefits to the consumer. And no matter what industry we're talking about here, different products across many industry have this similar concerns of not allowing circumvention to a digital lock of the device or product that they own. And in order for them to access for the intention of repair, this has to be carried out under the Copyright Act before other legislation can come forward.
And your bill addresses an important consumer rights issue in a very specific and concrete way. We will be, I'm sure, faced with some organizations that come to us with objections, and I expect we'll also hear from some others that would like the legislation to go further. When you look at your legislation, and we're going through this with MP Carr around his legislation, he'd even indicated an openness to certain amendments. Are there amendments that you would look to and say, well, we could tweak it this way to improve it? And I looked at that, but I couldn't exactly deliver on that with the time that I had. Or are there ways we could strengthen this bill?
Of course, I think there is definitely a lot more room for improvement on this bill. For example, I've spoken to Stryker, a stakeholder that develop health devices, and their main concern is if a non-technician decide to tamper the machine and cause a death in human lives, that's very critical. And of course, talking about amendments, there are certain exemptions that can come into place to consider specifically because of other consequences that we might face. But we also get to a dilemma where, if it's a life or death situation, and because during the pandemic, technician was not able to access the hospital facility to repair or diagnose a health machine, in those circumstances, what happened? And these are the situation we have to consider when discussing any amendments moving forward with the right to repair framework.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it. And thanks for bringing this bill to us. I really appreciate it. It's incredibly important as a matter of consumer rights.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Erskine-Smith. We'll move to Mr. Lemire for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Miao, and bravo for this bill and your efforts to defend this bill. It's always good to see that kind of example. The bill allows the government to modify some aspects of the framework under the law, including exceptions and through the regulations, in order to allow someone to get around technical protections through a law. Is this the change of the law is more important than changing the regulations? And if not, why aren't the regulations being adopted or changed?
I think both are important. Sorry to the member of Mr. Lemire. my French is not that well, so I'll reply my response in English. But it is very important because right now there is nothing in Canada that protects consumer right and providing them with the alternative and option to repair, which cause a very serious problem to our environment as well. The intention of this bill not only allow the circumvention of a TPM, but also have consequence affecting the environment because consumer face a very strong dilemma when products nowadays are mostly planned with planned obsolescence, limiting the lifespan of the devices, which sometimes even I have the experience of seeing a product which I might be able to fix easily with a part that we can find, but only the authorized dealers carry it. And if you get it from somewhere else and you install it, then the device will detect something that is not, part of the originality, and it will say you can't use this device as original as it can be. So in most cases, consumer will decide to, hey, instead of fixing it, why not just get a new one, right? And the old one will end up being in landfills or other third world countries that they don't have the privilege to take apart these products or recycle it for other uses.
Effectivement, le nœud du problème.
Yes, the Parliament, thank you for your leadership. The bill is confirming that we have the right to repair things that belong to us. And this bill frees repair persons to repair things. Is this something important for people who live in isolated or rural regions?
Of course, and an example I would give is someone in the prairies, which farmers rely on heavy equipment like a tractor to farm for goods that provide our produce in our nation. And whenever a repair or diagnostic is required, they will have to arrange logistics for the tractor to get to a nearby authorized dealer to carry out the repair necessary. This not only costs more money, more time, and also affecting the performance that it can be for the agriculture industry. And with a simple fix comes with consequence at this moment because a heavy equipment like a tractor costs millions of dollars in cases. And a small tamper will void every warranty that comes with it. So is that justifiable for farmers to do the repair themselves at this time, or going through the hassle of making the logistic to the dealers to make the repair?
Effectivement.
Indeed, that's an important challenge, where this is located. And what do you say to makers, automobile makers, with regard to your law?
So during our discussion with some of the automakers industry, the concerns around safety definitely comes as a top priority. And also with the advancement of technology, this bill is not only important from a context where the Copyright Act at that time that was carried out has not considered the computer programming that is related to a product. And in these circumstances, we're creating legislation not for us to use now, but for the future consideration as well. So in the automotive industry, I have to say there are many concerns. However, with the voluntary agreement that is in place right now, provide a leeway for some of the car owners to fix their vehicle in the local community repair shop rather than traveling far away. So definitely there is a lot of concern surrounding the industry, but I would say it's also important to consider all other industry across Canada.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lemire. Now, Mr. Marcy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to committee. It's good to have you here, and on the other side there, I want to follow up with Mr. Lemire's good questions with regards to the auto industry. In 2007, 8, and 9, I traveled the country to actually bring in right to repair for the auto sector, and I have a subsequent bill now in the House because the CASIS agreement was the settlement after my bill had passed the first round of the House of Commons, was going to second and third reading, and then we did the voluntary agreement at that time. How will this affect the voluntary agreement, in your opinion?
I think first, Mr. Massey, thank you for all the work you have done in regards to right to repair framework. I understand even back in 2009 when this voluntary agreement came into place, there are a lot of conversations surrounding it, especially now, because as we move forward with the target of eliminating all fossil fuel or gasoline vehicle on the street by 2035, there's going to be a lot more EVs on the street. And with the current situation where some of the manufacturers are not bound by the bound by the voluntary agreement, they do not have to provide the option of right to repair service by a third party, which is, I believe, is restricted not just to our Canadian consumers, but also lack the competition in our market because of that. So with this bill, I believe it will stand a strong ground and address to the unintended scope that the Copyright Act was never intended to do in this in the right to repair framework.
Right. Do you know if, and I don't know this, but because there's lots of discussion about the voluntary becoming mandatory, because Tesla in particular, it's ironic that we are putting in Tesla charging stations in parks, Canada places, and so forth, and they've opted out of the voluntary agreement. And there's people like myself that are questioning why should you actually be able to sell autos in Canada if you can just opt out of the voluntary agreement and circumvent the consumer market, circumvent young people trying to get training and servicing, and then also too is the other issues of public safety. Honda's also another particular player that has issues. Do you know if this will make that component mandatory, or is that something we have to look towards changing or amending? So I thank you for your efforts, but that's kind of the thing I'm looking at is like we have this voluntary agreement that has been working somewhat, but it seems outdated.
Well, I think this is quite important because by voluntary making it into mandatory, I'm sure there is a lot of studying and also consideration to explore. But at the same time, yes, I agree. Like we should give in that option not just to the manufacturer or automaker that is bound by the voluntary agreement, but any manufacturer that wants to do business in our country, because this is providing beneficial protection not just to our Canadians, but to the auto owners that save their hard-earned money to invest in the transportation that allows them to further their work and make a living in our country.
Okay, and one last quick question. One of the concerns I have is if we devolve a lot of this to the province, we could have provinces with different laws and rules. I had worked in the past on single event sports betting, and Mr. Waugh had his bill passed. We worked together on that. It was basically my bill. I took it back off the table, and he brought it forth and did a great, amazing job. But the problem is each province now has its own rules, and I've had concerns over some of how that's evolved. What do you say about the concerns about provinces having different jurisdictional decisions related to this initiative? And thank you for your time.
I feel the important part is, all governments needs to work together. The intention of carrying out legislation like this is really for what Canadians is needing and wanting. Most importantly, I believe legislation carried out in the province can be different depending on the region that they're located as well. So there are definitely more study to look into to see how we can better improve and not to have diversity on the different provincial jurisdiction on this legislation. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Massé.
Thank you very much. I will now turn to MP this.
Thank you, MP Miao, for being here today. You've certainly given us a lot to think about, a minor amendment with major consequences. This summer, I did some consultations with tractor dealers and in the agricultural sector in general in respect to this bill. It's garnered a lot of attention in British Columbia. One of the agricultural ag dealerships that I was speaking with, Matsui Ag Repair, they are licensed through various tractor manufacturers to repair on their behalf. And one thing they did mention, which I think is important, is that the amount of time and energy that and money that they have to spend on their staff to be up to date with all of the various computer programs to make sure that these modern tractors run. So the companies that do agricultural repair, tractor repair work invest significantly to do so. I just wanted to put that on the table. The second point he said is that this bill will actually have major environmental consequences, negative consequences. And he said that because right now fuel costs have gone up substantially for farmers across Canada. And he said one of the things he's already dealing with is that some of the, under the vehicle manufacturing standards in Canada, maybe under SEPA, that still needs to be amended on this front, is that the farmers are finding ways to cut costs by overriding the computer programs because they can't afford necessarily or want to afford all of the input costs to harvest their crops. So he said that he gave the example of a carburetor. It's easy in some cases for a farmer to override the software to essentially decrease the efficacy of the carburetor being used. Have you heard of similar instances in your consultations on the possibly negative environmental consequences of this bill in respect to circumventing computer programs to avoid high input costs?
Thank you for sharing your comments, and that's a very good question because yes, I did hear negative impacts of the related to environmental concern. But here's my question to you as well: is imagine this, a tractor being so expensive, and by overriding the compressor to have maximum performance, right? With this tampering of what I also consider as a TPM, it is considered illegal and would void the potential warranty with the dealership, right? And if that's the case, what happened with this, expensive investment put forward and end up, being just sit there in the farmland and not being used? There is a potential chance that the farmer might purchase another vehicle, right? And by purchasing another vehicle, that means we need the raw materials. We also need all the technologies and potentially investment in research area to better advance the old piece of technology. And when we come to environmental concerns, yes, we do have those resources under our earth, but at the same time, environmentalists will have the consideration of why are we exploiting more resources when we can recycle the existing equipment.
Generally, farmers, when they're making an investment for a tractor, I know they want to use that. The life cycle of that vehicle is quite long, and that's a 20-year investment in some cases for some of the producers in your riding and mine, which have similar agricultural products. One of the other points you mentioned in your opening testimony, you talked about the legal consequences. Can you point to any court cases or rulings by courts in Canada that we as a committee can examine so we can have a better, if we look at possible amendments, which you said you were open to, that we can see how the Copyright Act has been used in the context that you're trying to address it? Or do you have any court cases in mind that you could point us to offhand?
Thank you very much for that. And I don't actually have any existing court cases in mind, but regarding on this issue, there is always the gray area where parts are imported from the origin of the where the product is manufactured, and using it as a repair option for consumers. However, the cost that comes with fixing it with an authorized dealer will definitely cost more than going to third-party repair shop that is probably open in some community as well. Is it illegal to do such circumvention? I think it also comes with a huge consequence of the consumer, because finding a less expensive alternative to repair also create other restriction that they can't use further on their warranty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share the remaining.
Thank you. Well, there is no remaining of your time, Mr. Viss. I'm sorry, the 5 minute is up, so we'll move to MP Dung for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I also want to congratulate MP Miao for bringing forward his first Prime Member's bill in the House. This is a very interesting topic, and thank you very much for raising the attention on this. When I studied this bill and look at different backgrounds and analysis, I can't help to think the importance of striking a balance between maximizing efficiency in our economy while providing incentive to innovation, and at the same time striking a balance between consumer protection or consumer rights protection versus consumer safety and security and also privacy concern nowadays is a hot topic. So I kind of start thinking about this backwards. When Copyright Act was originally designed and the prohibition was put in place on the TPM, there got to be a reason for it. And I want to hear your thoughts on this. What's your understanding on why the TPM was restricted or shall now be circumvented under the current context of the Copyright Act?
Thank you, member, for your questions. And there's definitely concerns to be raised, depending on the product and what is permitted to circumvent the TPM. There's potential risks such as health risks, safety risks, cybersecurity risks, and privacy violation in the Copyright Act. And most of the time, people won't think about the right of repair under the copyright context. However, in order to repair a product, you need access to, right now, where I see there's more computer programming that is restricting these access to allow any diagnostic or repair or maintenance to be done.
Your thinking is that when the bill was originally designed, it did not pay enough attention to the right to repair and how quickly technology evolves, and now things that we learn on YouTube, and there would be simple things that people are smarter actually nowadays to fix on their own. I heard a lot of discussion about the automaker agreement, and for me, I remember the days I have to look at how much does it cost to buy a phone with a contract and buy a phone without a contract, because the major hurdle is buy a phone without contract, you have to find somebody to unlock it if you have to travel somewhere else. So now we don't have this headache anymore. So I definitely see the benefit of what you're talking about. But at the same time, I wonder if, in your view, if there should be a limitation to what type of product, what type of industry, because obviously trained professionals is also a concern. I don't think that, or maybe that's your vision, that anyone can repair this or anyone can circumvent this, or only those technicians receive some degree of training are allowed to circumvent the TPM. What's your thoughts on that?
I would say not that anyone can make the repair, but it does take an effort to learn and really understand the skills and knowing what to do in certain products. Especially back in the days, cars do not have too much electrical parts in it, and people like to get their hands dirty and get into a car and fix things, right? In those circumstances, with YouTube allowing us to learn about more on DIY, there is parts that is not recommended, such as taking out the battery pack from a Tesla and putting it on another car, for example, right? Like these are risky action that I would say let's leave it to the professionals and technicians to do so.
So you believe that there should be some sort of minimum requirement on whoever's performing this. Okay, so my last question has to do with CUSMA, because a lot of people brought this up, and I want to hear from you. I wonder your thoughts on should this amendment be passed and become law, and would that decrease our competitiveness internationally? And I mean, competing with the American counterparts as well as CUSMA countries as a whole, competing with the rest of the world.
So right now, under the CUSMA Act, there are exceptions that prohibit circumvention of TPM, and with this, there is definitely a lot more study that we can look into to how to better and not have the unintended consequence that we want to have, that is against our CUSMA agreement. But at the same time, it also allowed opening of a new market where there is parts, there is aftermarket product that can be used, allowing consumer to fix and even modify to perform a better result.
Okay. So do your research. What's your read on the trend?
Oui, mes excuses.
Sorry. Mr. Dong, you don't have any more time.
Je passerai maintenant
I will now go to Mr. Lemire. Chair, Mr. Mian, what do you think about programmed obsolescence? Have you looked at any of the practices that might extend the life of a good, and do you think there should be some kind of code for durability and repairability?
Of course, I think we definitely need to look at the values that consumers are putting in, how durable a product is. The lifespan of any product nowadays definitely have a expectation or desired performance, and with planned obsolescence, a great example I can think of right now is when I'm sure most of us own an iPhone, and because of an update that can decrease your performance, and these are software programs or computer programs that only the owner or manufacturer can get access to tweak. And another scenario I can think of is, like the member Mr. Fisk had mentioned, is when we are trying to do override or modification to certain software, it maximizes certain performance as well. So definitely, I think that should be looked into, and we should find ways to at least have a a standard of what quality or how durable a product should be sold to our Canadian consumers.
Merci. Depuis
Thank you very much. Since 2015, American regulations allow for circumventing TPMs to undertake authorized repairs. How does your bill compare to the American regulations?
It's very similar in context, I would say, and these are different parts of the right to repair framework we have to consider. And coming back to my private member's bill, Copyright Act was never intended to stop the circumvention of a TPM for repairs purpose. So it's important for us to consider this as well while making any conversation surrounding the legislation.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Massé.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just continuing with the bill, do you anticipate that with this you'll get also support from young people and others that want to do technology creativity, not for profit, but for their ability to actually just explore and to work on devices, some old in many respects, that right now we've seen frivolous lawsuits in the past put on youth for that?
Of course, and I think you brought up a very important point as well, because what we're doing here right now with the right to repair framework is providing options for consumers to fix the product and not to throw away the product, which lessen the burden of our environment and which is something that our future generation would enjoy. At the same time, young individuals right now are becoming more and more creative and innovative, and allowing them to have access to learn how to do the repairs or maintaining a product allows a better innovative idea to a product, per se, and also maybe creating something new that we can advance on our technology.
Thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair, and thank the member for that, because there are some that use frivolous lawsuits against young people when they're doing this type of work, and they're not doing it for creating profit for themselves. And we've seen that in the past. So thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Massé. We'll move to Mr. Fast for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Miao, for bringing this bill before us. I want to return to the discussion of USMCA or CUSMA and our relationship to other trading partners around the world. Have you considered whether your bill complies not only with USMCA, but with the WIPO treaties, which effectively regulate the use of copyrighted property around the world?
Well, thank you, member, for that question. That part was not considered during my preparation of this private member's bill. However, surrounding the CUSMA agreement right now, the Copyright Act provides free prohibition with TPM circumvention activity. The first one would be the circumvention prohibition, and the second is the service prohibition, and the third is the device prohibition. However, there is categories that provide exception to these free TPM prohibition in the agreement. It's the law enforcement and national security, interoperability of computer programs, personal information, security, persons with perceptible disabilities, and radio apostles.
If I can briefly interrupt you there, my question is specifically focused on our multilateral obligations. CUSMA, of course, is a trilateral agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S., but we have a whole bunch of trading partners all around the world under the WTO, and many of them have signed on to the WIPO treaties. If I could just ask you to come back to this committee, or at least provide us with additional information on whether we're in compliance with those. My next question has to do with warranties, going back to that discussion which a number of individuals around this table have already addressed. If I were advising an OEM on how to address this legislation, it would be to use warranties to circumvent the spirit and intent of your bill. Does this bill actually specifically address the use of warranties as a circumvention tool?
I would say warranty usually fall in a certain period of time. Usually from a year, from 1 to maybe 10 years, depending on the equipment investment, right? At the same time, there is part of this bill consideration of exception by allowing the circumvention through a third party to carry on the repair services. But at the same time, I feel, yes, this can be a consideration to make further amendments to the current bill.
Glad to hear that. I was just going to propose that you perhaps consider an amendment that would address warranties specifically, because I fully expect that the industry, the OEMs, will find a way of using warranties, extended warranties, long extended warranties, to ensure that the right of repair is circumvented and that third parties won't be able to do that work.
Maybe I can add a little bit on that topic is, with this bill, and if it does pass with the support that I can get previously, I would say these are also further legislation that can be carried out through different provinces and territories across the nation, or in relation to other legislation in the federal responsibility as well.
How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
About a minute, Mr. Fast.
All right. Mr. Miao, could you explain in greater detail what it is that has changed in the repair industry environment that necessitates a specific bill to create the right of repair? I mean, we right now have third parties doing work on all kinds of equipment, but something must have changed in the legal landscape or in the digital landscape that now makes it necessary for you to bring forward a bill like this.
I would use this as an example. When I was shopping for a new fridge for my family, I've noticed a fridge, the intended use of a fridge is to store produce in a cool environment. But now fridge comes with all these new technologies, touchscreen or reminder of buying a milk if there's no milk detected in the fridge. Like, it comes with a lot more computer or digital component comes with it. And in the past, there wasn't as much digital component in any in the device that we use for the intention of that. But at this time, I think there's a lot more to consider, because we are in the stage of where Internet of Things are very common. And the Copyright Act, although it has considered computer program falls under the work of a Copyright Act, but it's not looked into in the perspective where a TPM is circumvented.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Miao. We'll move finally for Mr. Gahir for about 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to MP Miao for making an appearance for the committee. Congratulations. So we know that there's an extraordinary amount of e-waste that's generated, and that's only getting worse with manufacturers making it increasingly hard to repair equipment, including iPhones, for example. What impact would the bill have on the environment?
I'd say there's definitely a big impact on the environment, because rather than throwing away a product that can be easily repaired or consider the alternative of repairing it, we are able to reuse the materials and allow a second life and extending the lifespan of the product. Imagine how much we're shopping online right now. And all of those products are being thrown away because of a minor defect or because of a malfunction that is caused, that something cannot be controlled by the consumer to access and make the repair themselves. Even bring it out to a third-party repair shop to do that.
Great, thank you. So are there risks associated with allowing people to circumvent TPMs for the purposes of repair? For example, I look at farm equipment, allowing someone that doesn't have specific expertise in that piece of equipment. Wouldn't it be dangerous if they can tamper with that?
Of course, you brought a very important point because, if a technician do not have the skills and license to conduct a repair, there can be a potential risk related to safety or the use of the equipment that may cause severe consequences. And that is why it's important for us to keep that in consideration when TPM is circumvent. And I'm happy to discuss any amendment that can better improve the bill to have that consideration as well.
Great. So we know that cars are very smart nowadays with the amount of technology that they have in them and what they're recording, for example, as they drive about your behavior. Technology companies have also made it so that they have exclusive access to that data. So what do you have to say about that, the data piece of it?
As I mentioned previously about how our world is filled of Internet of Things, these devices are, communicating with each other through a network. And I believe a member of the opposition have carried out the bill C-294 discussing about the interoperability of a device. These are something we can look into further to see how we can be more secure and considerate of the effect and consequences when computer programs are talking with each other.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Gayer, and thank you very much, MP Miao, for bringing this bill forward and joining us in committee today. So this is the end of the first hour. I will have to now suspend briefly so that we bring in witnesses for the second hour. So again, thanks a lot, MP Miao, and I now suspend the meeting. to the Standing Committee of Industry on Industry and Technology. So for this second hour of our meeting, we have from the Associated Equipment Distributors, Mr. Craig Drury, who's former chair. We have from the Automotive Industries Association of Canada, Alana Baker, Senior Director of Government Relations, as well as Sylvain Séguin, Président Fixed Network Canada. Et nous avons the Global Automakers.
And from the Global Automakers of Canada, we have David Adams, President and Chief Executive Officer. So without further delay, we'll ask Mr. Drury to take the floor.
And good afternoon. And thank you for inviting the Associated Equipment Distributors to present on Bill C-244. It is an honor to appear before you today as the Associated Equipment Distributors' immediate past chair and as Vice President of Operations at Vermeer Canada. AED is an international trade association representing companies that sell, rent, service, manufacture, construction, farm, mining, energy, forestry, and industrial equipment and related supplies. AED's Canadian members account for more than $8.7 billion in annual sales and services and employs over 27,000 workers at 400 locations across the country. Right to repair is a simple slogan. However, the policy proposals surrounding the issue are complex with significant consequences. At the outset, I want to make it clear. AED members support customers' right to repair their machinery, and distributors make available diagnostic tools, repair information, parts, and remote customer support. Idle, non-functioning equipment equals lost time and money, whether it's on a farm during harvest or a road building project. There's absolutely zero incentive to not do everything we can as equipment dealers and manufacturers to keep the machine running. That can mean repairs completed at a dealership service, technician, the customer, or a third-party provider. The equipment industry is highly competitive, and if Vermeer Canada isn't providing proper and timely service, nothing is stopping the customer from moving to one of the many competitors and their products. However, we don't support unfettered access to critical onboard software and information pertaining to the environmental and safety protections or key operational functions, which is what Bill C-244 would ultimately do. While customers can complete most repairs to their machinery, environmental and safety functions, as well as technological developments that have made equipment more efficient and productive, necessitate restrictions in access to source code and software that ensure key operational functions aren't modified or disabled. Manufacturers of equipment rely on a network of independent, many of which are family-owned, small to medium-sized companies to sell, rent, and service the equipment. These dealers make significant investments in their employees, including training service technicians to repair and maintain the latest high-technology equipment machinery. Many AED members' facilities are located in rural and underserved areas, creating well-paying jobs and economic opportunity. The equipment industry has invested significant time and resources to mitigate environmental harm, resulting in a substantial reduction in emissions. Of great concern, Bill C-244 threatens important environmental gains as they would permit unfettered access to embedded software to circumvent emissions protections. Similarly, modern equipment has numerous safety features to protect both equipment operators and the public, the latter who oftentimes are driving or walking past construction sites and other areas while machinery is in use. Granting access to override safety features as C-244 would do poses undue risk for operators and bystanders. Additionally, equipment dealers invest countless resources to train certified technicians to work on complex machinery. By mandating access to embedded source code, unqualified individuals will attempt to repair the world's most advanced and sophisticated equipment at significant risk to themselves, operators, and the public. The aforementioned begs the question, why would someone want to circumvent emissions or safety protections? The answer is simple: machine performance. Limits on horsepower and other functions the machine might be able to carry out are necessary to ensure equipment is environmentally friendly and safe. A simple Google search yields the plethora of vendors offering products and service to assist equipment owners to modify their machines. Requiring access to source code and embedded software will only proliferate this practice with significant negative ramifications for environment and safety. Proponents of Bill C-244 tout the environmental benefits because customers won't need to discard products readily as they are able to fix products themselves. However, heavy equipment is among the most durable manufactured products commercially available. Equipment will oftentimes be sold to a customer, traded in when the customers purchase a new machine, and subsequent either resold or rented. Improper maintenance or modifications related to granting unfettered access to source code jeopardizes a machine's operation and longevity, which may cause negative environmental and safety impacts and shorten its production life. Simply put, the equipment industry's right to repair proposals are a solution in search of a problem. AED members provide customers and third-party repair providers with parts, tools, and other resources to complete the overwhelming majority of equipment repairs. It's bad business not to do so. Out-of-service equipment isn't merely an inconvenience. It can ruin a farmer's harvest or delay completion of a bridge or roadway. Thank you again for the honor of appearing before you today. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Drury.
Thank you very much, Mr. Drury. Before going on to the following speaker, I would just like to inform you that I will not recognize any MP does not have the recommended equipment. Now, Ms. Baker.
Merci. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, honourable members of the committee, for the opportunity to appear before you to speak to Bill C-244. Je vais faire ma parole.
I'm going to make my presentation in English, but we would be quite happy to speak to any questions in French.
And I am the Senior Director of Government Relations for the Automotive Industries Association of Canada, otherwise known as AIA Canada. I'm joined today by Sylvain Seguin, President of Fixed Network Canada, a global leader in collision, glass, and mechanical repair services, operating over 2,000 points of service worldwide. AIA Canada represents, supports, and leads innovation in Canada's $32.2 billion auto care sector. Our more than 4,000 members located in every riding across Canada help keep the country's fleet of almost 30 million vehicles on the road. Whether you have been in a collision or require maintenance, our members help vehicles last longer, pollute less, and keep drivers safer by offering Canadians any product or service a vehicle may need after it rolls off the dealership's lot. I want to begin my remarks by making clear the automotive aftermarket's support for the intention and principles behind this bill. Bill C-244 is a step in the right direction when it comes to leveling the playing field for service and repair of consumer goods, something that is of importance not just to the automotive sector, but to many others. Having the flexibility to repair your goods or have them maintained by third-party providers is critical in a price-conscious market, as it allows Canadians to shop around for competitive pricing. Given persistent levels of inflation, ensuring a competitive marketplace does not just help businesses, but consumers as well. This bill comes at a critical moment when manufacturers of goods, including vehicles, have become increasingly sophisticated in their ability to create a closed loop for service, diagnostics, and repair. The more complex an item is to repair, the more challenging it is to service. This is increasingly the case for vehicles on our roads, which are effectively computers on wheels. However, while addressing digital locks is important, there are still loopholes that can be exploited by manufacturers to prevent third parties from repairing or servicing goods. Any legislation that proposes to address this issue should contain clear verbiage that eliminates manufacturers from the ability to circumvent the sharing of data to prevent independent shops from obtaining diagnostic, repair, or maintenance information for the purposes of legitimate repair. To that end, we believe there are some amendments that can be made to this bill that would strengthen its intention and that would truly pave the way for right to repair in Canada. These amendments, which include parallel changes to the Competition Act, would help reinforce a manufacturer's requirement to allow access to vehicle data. I would be happy to speak about this in greater detail during the Q&A session. Without access to a vehicle's diagnostic data, independent auto repair shops cannot service a vehicle. This makes it harder to make sure vehicles are operating as efficiently as possible, and we expect this problem to grow significantly over the years ahead. Without intervention, automakers will continue to control the terms through which independent auto shops access this data. Lawmakers around the world have recognized the importance of right to repair, including legislation that gives consumers the right to repair their vehicle. 83% of Canadians agree that automakers should be required by law to share data with independent auto repair shops. Canada cannot afford to be left behind. Government must act quickly to advance right to repair principles through forthcoming legislative efforts. Stories are emerging every day about the inability of our members to service vehicles because manufacturers make it difficult or sometimes impossible to access essential data and information. One example was highlighted during our recent Advocacy Day by another member of Parliament. The auto repair shop that this member typically goes to purchased brake pads to fix his vehicle, but was unable to access the repair information from the manufacturer, Volvo, to complete the repair. The repair shop then gave the member of Parliament the brake pads they had purchased and had the car towed to the Volvo dealership. The dealership then told the customer they would not repair the car with aftermarket brake pads, meaning the customer had to pay more money for original equipment manufacturer parts. Stories like this are all too frequent, and they will become more common without intervention by legislation. It is critical that vehicle owners, and not the automakers, are the owners of their vehicle data so that they can continue to choose where they bring their vehicle. Addressing this issue will allow our small and medium-sized enterprises to remain competitive and continue to serve as the primary provider of essential vehicle services to Canadians. I want to thank MP Wilson Miao once again for his work on this bill and committee members for the opportunity to present today. We look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Baker. We'll now turn to Mr. Adams for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the members of the committee for the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of the 15 member companies of the Global Automakers of Canada. Our manufacturing members, Honda and Toyota, represent 55% of the Canadian light-duty vehicle production through September 2022, while all members, as exclusive Canadian distributors of some of the world's largest global automakers, were responsible for 62% of Canadian sales in 2021. My members recognize the importance of an open, fair, and competitive repair industry while maintaining safety and quality standards for the benefit of consumers. That is what the Canadian Automotive Service Information Standard provides to the automotive industry. That said, some in the automotive aftermarket have utilized this bill to try and secure more rights, which we have yet to understand. We have serious concerns about Bill C-244 because it exposes vehicles to the prospect of theft, hacking, and compromised vehicle safety and emission standards, for which vehicle manufacturers are stringently regulated before they can put a vehicle on the road and after. The bill allows the circumvention of technological protection measures in a computer program if the circumvention is solely for the purpose of diagnosis, maintenance, or repair of a product. In practical terms, how does an ordinary person circumvent technological protection measures? More importantly, what are the ramifications of anyone being provided the capability of legally circumventing TPMs for any reason? For an automobile that operates on public roads at potentially high rates of speed, we believe the risks of injury or death for the user and the general public are obviously exponentially greater than other products when TPMs are removed. Critically, how would a consumer know, or how would a consumer, the manufacturer, or potentially the courts know who had circumvented the TPMs and for what reasons? What would be the due diligence undertaken to ensure that the individual undertaking the circumvention of any TPMs had the appropriate certification and training to undertake the diagnostic repairs? Will the circumvention of TPMs be recorded on a consumer's bill of sale so consumers understand their potential consumer protection recourse? Will the repairer also take on the responsibility and liability associated with the circumvention of TPMs? Will the repairer provide a full and complete record of repair work undertaken to the manufacturer to establish continuity of service in the event liability issues arise with respect to the safety or emissions noncompliance or a cybersecurity attack? When MP Brian May brought forward a previous iteration of this bill, it was made clear that the automotive industry was not subject of the bill because we have had a solution in place that has worked since 2010, known as the Canadian Automotive Service Information Standard, or CASIS for short. Under that voluntary agreement, manufacturers are required to provide the service information, training, tools, and equipment to the aftermarket so that any qualified mechanic can repair a consumer's vehicle. We're proud of the support, expert advice, help desk that our industry makes available to the automotive mechanics across the country, and we are open to explore ways to improve upon this. For the automotive industry, the right to repair clearly exists. Repair statistics bear this out when comparing repairs done by the aftermarket vis-a-vis OEM dealers. Therefore, members have been aggressively lobbied by the automotive aftermarket for so-called rights that already exist. Finally, Bill C-226, an act respecting cybersecurity, is before Parliament, and it will introduce more stringent standards and monitoring to ensure that Canadians are protected from cybersecurity risks and threats. Yet, the bill before this committee would open up opportunities for cybersecurity risks and hacking. It is not only incongruent, but it puts consumers at unnecessary risk. Indeed, consumer protection is at the heart of this issue. Consumers need to be assured that when their vehicle is serviced and repaired, that it has done so to OEM service and repair standards, and that those repairing the vehicle are accountable and liable both to the consumer and regulatory authorities for such repairs. We are on board with Right to Repair solutions. We have been for the last dozen years since CASIS was established. This solution benefits consumers and the aftermarket without creating dangerous safety and cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Adams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. So I'll now go to Mr. Fast.
Well, thank you very much to all of our witnesses for appearing before us. Let me start off with a very general question to both Mr. Drury and Mr. Adams. Do either one of you support any right of repair by third parties?
Speak for myself. I think the fact that we've got a voluntary agreement in place and have for the last dozen years it speaks to itself that we do support a right to repair.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Drury?
Yes, it's the AED's position that we do support right to repair as well. As I said before, it's just we need to keep equipment running in order to be the solution of choice for our customers to come to us. So yes, we do.
So do I understand either one of you to say that if a right to repair bill came before Parliament that actually addressed some, if not all, of your concerns, you might support it?
I think the reality is that what's before the committee currently opens up a host of problems and challenges with respect to, I think as both Mr. Drury and I have enunciated, potential risk to safety, potential risk to environmental compliance, various other initiatives that are problematic.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think the answer to your question is yes, we would support it if our issues were around safety, emissions, and the other one too that I think we're not talking about a lot of is machine performance. Machines can be, software is there to control how the machine is designed to operate in a safe way from a performance perspective, and that could easily be modified to put the machine where it's working in an unsafe way, so that we're concerned about that as well.
All right, and Ms. Baker, thank you for your presentation as well. Did I hear you say that you believe auto owners, not automakers, should be the owners of their data, including diagnostic data?
Yes, it's our view that it's your vehicle, your data as the auto owner.
Okay, so how do we protect the OEMs with respect to the issues that have been mentioned by both Mr. Drury and Mr. Adams?
So let me start with the I guess we've heard a lot about privacy, cybersecurity. This has always been a priority for the aftermarket. Cybersecurity and privacy should not become reasons to justify limiting serviceability. I would say, notably as an example, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in the U.S. recently released updated cybersecurity practices for motor vehicles and recommended that automotive industry provides strong vehicle cybersecurity protections that do not unduly restrict access by alternative third-party repair services that are authorized by the vehicle owner. The aftermarket wants repair information to be accessible through an interoperable, standardized, open system. And it's also worth mentioning that among IT experts, we have seen that there is opinion that a multi-layered architecture of interoperable open systems might offer better protection against cybersecurity attacks in closed systems. Also, cybersecurity and privacy risks can be managed. They can be managed throughout the vehicle's life cycle through collaboration between automakers and the aftermarket and industry and regulatory experts. So I would say that implementing industry standards can create it can be safe, they can create secure, direct, and standardized access to the vehicle data, which can then be directed to the repair facilities of the consumer's choosing. At the end of the day, it comes down to consumer choice.
You also mentioned that there were some changes to the Competition Act that you felt might be required to ensure that the OEMs don't circumvent the right of repair. Perhaps expand on that.
Sure. We Some amendments that can be made to the bill, to this bill 244, that would strengthen its intention, and that would truly pave the way for the right to repair in Canada. So parallel changes to the Competition Act would help to reinforce a manufacturer's requirement to allow access to diagnostic and repair information, which would address some of the systemic issues around data ownership and allow our small and medium-sized businesses to truly compete. We did see Bill C-231, which was brought forward by MP Brian Massey, and I want to thank Mr. Massey for bringing this forward in February 2022. That bill contains a number of amendments to the Competition Act that would help to access the data. So in particular, we are proposing a new section be added after Section 75 of the Competition Act, 75.1, vehicles, access and information and service parts. And I would be happy to provide the members of the committee with the specific text after the presentation today.
Could you just explain to the committee how this bill will actually improve competition in the marketplace?
Sure. Do you want to jump in? Or? Okay. So, you know, when let me just bring it back to the consumers for a minute, because consumers today are grappling with high levels of cost of living expenses, and the type of monopolistic control and behavior that we're seeing from manufacturers, frankly, is unacceptable, particularly during these times when it adds to the cost of the burden cost of increase. Governments have a responsibility, and it's time to modernize our laws and bring them up to date so that they can keep pace with the rapid advancements in vehicle technology that we are seeing, and that they are fit for the wireless world that we are currently living in today. This is not just about competition, ensuring fair competition. This is about the preservation and protection of consumer choice and ensuring that consumers have continued access to reliable, essential, and affordable vehicle service and repair.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baker. And Ms. Fast, Ms. Lapointe. Thank you very much.
Mr. Drury, I'm from Sudbury, where we are a global mining center. And we know that the mining industry uses a vast amount of equipment in their operations. So can you describe for the committee the impact C-244 would have on this sector? And I'm specifically interested in learning about the economic impact as well as the environmental impact on the mining industry.
Sure. So I'm not directly in the mining industry, so I'm going to talk generally on this. But for example, there's a project in Fort McMurray right now where there's a number of autonomous truck fleets running that require very sophisticated software and control systems on those to operate in a safe way. The other comment I would make, and again, this is a general comment, but today I am sure there is, in all mining operations in Canada, there is software going back and forth. There will be trained technicians on those jobs, both on behalf of the OEMs, the dealers, and the customer themselves, to make sure that those machines are as productive as possible. The mining industry is probably the one where production is very important. If it just the sheer size of the numbers in that, if machines are down, it's a big deal. So there's a lot of support going on to make that work. So from an economic perspective, I know anecdotally the stories I've heard is that it drives jobs on all three of those, the dealer, the OEM, and the site themselves.
This summer, we held a roundtable in Sudbury with the Minister of Agriculture when she came to visit, and some of our local farmers. And one of the challenges they cited for farmers, especially in rural areas, is the increasing lack of access to mechanics and for mechanical parts for their farming equipment. Is it your view that that C-244 could help address this challenge for rural farmers?
I'm going to say no. We today are sharing, again, as much information as possible. In fact, I need to take a little issue with the remarks in in the beginning is there really aren't tractors down right now because they don't have the information. The good dealers out there are supplying information to keep those machines running. I've got people on staff right now that are getting fault codes on their phones before the customer even knows about it, and the parts are on their way so the customer can repair them themselves before they even know there's an issue. That's the reality of what's going on in the field today, regardless of how remote it is. So I would suggest if the customers have good relationships with their dealers, they're going to be probably as productive as opposed to trying to do it on their own.
Okay. My next question is for Mrs. Baker. So I read your submission to the committee, and I wanted you to expand on your statement regarding protecting consumers by legislation that reflects the new reality of vehicles in Canada. Especially, and I think you speak about the aftermarket, direct, remote, and real-time access to diagnostic data.
Sure, I just lost my feed, but I think I got the just a bit. So I'll say that we are seeing rapid advancements in vehicle technology. And so, like I said, vehicles on today's roads are effectively computers on wheels. So cars today are now equipped with vehicle telematic systems. These systems refer to the computer hardware that is embedded in a vehicle. It collects and stores and processes all the data on the health of the vehicle systems, including the data that's needed for diagnostics and repair. And then this data is transmitted directly back from the vehicle to a back-end server wirelessly, where it's under control and ownership of the automaker. The problem that we're seeing now is that the telematic systems that are installed in the vehicles by the automakers are going to replace onboard diagnostics as the source of vehicle diagnostic data. And because the automakers own the telematic systems through which this data is collected, stored, and processed and wirelessly transmitted, they are the de facto owners of the data and control access to it. So when it comes to the consumers, they do not have a choice on where ultimately they bring their vehicle for service and repair. If our shops do not have access to that data, they simply can't fix the car.
A question to all members of the panel. Is it your sense that the repair industry benefit from this legislation? Will it be proportional to the loss that technology companies will experience?
I think I would say that there's the risks with this particular bill before us now for the automotive industry in any event outweigh the gains of the bill moving forward for the reasons that I enunciated in my testimony.
I think I would generally agree with that. The instances where we have shared some of these higher level machine information so the customers can fix it themselves, generally get themselves into more trouble than where they started in the first place, which makes their machines less productive. So I would agree with that.
If I can just add that on my side, I represent 600 franchisee, whether it's collision, mechanical, and we totally agree with certification program, training program. Actually, we have 3 training centers across the country. But unfortunately, as of today, we don't have access to all the repair data. So to that point, I mean, it's highly important that when the vehicle is fixed, that it's fixed as per the OE certification. And if we don't have access to that data, I'm highly afraid that some of the vehicles are being fixed without following the right procedure. So on that, that's my point of view on the.
Okay, merci.
Merci beaucoup. Je passerai maintenant la parole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lemire, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Ms. Baker, Mr. Seguin, the arrival of electric vehicles will greatly change the industry and all the mechanical aspects, which are very different. And if we talk about interoperability for an electric vehicle, do you see aspects of their construction, things that would compensate this situation? If I take a vehicle and the vehicles that we repair in our network, we only have 30% of vehicles that are have advanced systems, but with electric vehicles, the new technologies, whether they be with regard to safety or equipment or training, that will greatly increase costs for our networks. There's already a lack of manpower and employees, but with the investments necessary and new certifications, training and things, that will further limit our capacity for electric vehicles, and that will add costs for us. And therefore, in your sector, could your system could be threatened by the restriction for the manufacturers as independents, whether we're in the major cities or regions? I mean, there are a lot of customers that want to come and see us for repairs. With regard to capacity and the availability of services in the regions, if there's no access, what can you do? Well, we have transport costs for bringing vehicles to an area where there are certified workshops, for example, for environmental aspects and for cost aspects. We couldn't survive, I don't think. I'm going to my colleague, Mr. Geneva, says that he has an electric vehicle and receives information on his phone, monthly reports, and sometimes there gets alerts about repairs, and you would never have access to this kind of thing in the current situation. Is this bill something that would open the door to more competition and better service? Yes, of course. I think that for us, what is extremely important is to have access to all the data in order to repair vehicles. I mean, these could be things that are important for the manufacturer, but with regard to our mechanics and our repairs, we have to have access to the information to ensure we have an adequate level of services. And as a result, I think as a consumer, this way of operating, that the automobile industry protects its data, means that we'll end up paying more for repairs because they end up having a monopoly. And do you think that that adds the cost, add up to the cost for the consumer? Yes, certainly. I'll give you an example. Because we don't have enough certified repairmen in our workshops, that adds up to costs. And if we have a car that comes in being in an accident and we loan a rental car to them, and the delays are often longer, and often then the consumer has to pay more for a replacement vehicle. And what happens with emergency vehicles, fire department and things? Often, if they don't know how to make changes, can that be dangerous, especially in areas where they can't find the right parts and things? I have an ambulance in my area that needs repairs, and there's no manufacturer or no certified repairer in our area, and that will cause delays and transportation costs and extra costs. And this bills can be improved. Do you see anything that could be added or anything that could be amended to ensure that we protect consumers better and increase competition? Yes, I think that, in my opinion, we have to be able to have properly trained technicians to make proper repairs. We want to have access to this information in order to train our repair personnel. And what would you say to people from the industry who say that that might have an effect on safety and on environment? I would say that without access to the data, I'm a lot more worried, because when you look at capacity, a manufacturer can't repair all the vehicles that need repairs. And I think that we need more repair persons capable of repairing vehicles, and I think it's more risk for the consumer with the current situation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Lemire. Now, Mr. Massé.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to our witnesses. It's good to see you, Mr. Adams. We've known each other for a long time, even though I'm virtual. But I do want to ask, starting with your association, do all of the participants in your association share the same information, provide the same access, and do so to Canada, excuse me, as they do the United States, the European Union, and Asia? So let's say, for example, Honda, do they provide identically the same things in Canada as they do as the United States, Asia, and European Union?
European Union, I can't speak to the United States, though, and my understanding is yes, that's the case.
Okay, so, okay, well, so I guess here's what I get, is I get a lot of questions like from dealers and so forth, and maybe I'll go to Mr. Drury with that, because we do have the CASIS agreement, and I'll come back to Mr. Adams on that later, and Ms. Baker, but you say it's a solution in search of a problem, but we have three major political parties with legislation that deal with the aftermarket. Why do you think this is coming to us? And why do you think that there's so much concern that's been raised on Parliament about this? If you think there is no problem whatsoever, is it that we've been duped?
No, I don't think you've been duped. I do think there are some situations where we as dealers could do better in terms of dealing with machine down in rural areas, for example. But just to, you know, I know in our business, more than half of the parts that we sell go directly to the customer for them to put on themselves, as an example. So we are supporting.
But you're saying it's a solution in search of a problem. So I'd like to know, what is it you think that's brought you to this table here if there is no problem whatsoever, and why three major political parties have bills to deal with this issue?
Well, it's our position that well, there's two things. So first of all, we do support right to repair. We are supporting our customers with the information and parts to repair machines themselves. So that's number one. Number two is where the problem comes is in the unintended consequences of allowing our customers certain accesses to the machines.
Well, I understand that position. I understand that position, but that doesn't explain why we're here. So I understand your position you submitted, but I think it's a pretty difficult thing to accept at Parliament Hill, saying it's solution in search of a problem. I mean, we're here for a reason. I'm going to go back to the CASIS example then to Mr. Adams. What are the consequences if you have a member that does not want to comply with CASIS, and can you confirm that every single one of your members comply in the same way?
I can't confirm that every one of my members comply in the same way. And in terms of consequences, I think what we have established is that the agreement has been working well for the last dozen years. And the incidences where we've had people saying, well, they can't get service and repair information have been few and far between.
Well, that's not what I'm hearing, just so you know, and we'll get more testimony hopefully about those things. And I'm glad you're here to say that. Do you feel that CASIS needs to be updated or made mandatory and maybe have some consequences? So right now we have a good example is Tesla. They don't even participate. So how do we deal with that issue and others that are coming into the market?
Issue that we recognized when we set CASIS up a dozen years ago that we were going to have to deal with down the road, as is security information, for instance. And I think you know, Mr. Massey, that security information was not part of the CASIS agreement because we had no mechanism to be able to deal with it in Canada at the time. 2 years after CASIS was established, we did establish a vehicle security professional mechanism that was actually better than the U.S. But I think what happened is that the individual that was tracking all that for the aftermarket unfortunately passed away. And there was a gap in the system and there was no way to address that. So Canadians no longer enjoy that opportunity.
Okay, over to Ms. Baker. Now, one of the things that I'm concerned about, like I have a dealer. I go to a Ford dealership. I also go to the aftermarket as well too. I can tell you that I hear enough, and I get particular testimony from people that can't get, the information. And I've actually been the victim of that. What does this say about young people that want to get into this profession in the future? As we have vehicles change, one of the things I'm concerned about is that the dealers know that they can't actually perform all the maintenance and the type of things that are necessary, and the aftermarket is critical. I'm concerned about young people that are investing the cost of education and their time and then getting into an unstable market. And that's one of the reasons I think that the CASIS agreement needs either at least modernization or enforcement.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Massey. I agree. If on CASIS for just a minute, I mean, again, this is an agreement that's now outdated. It's over a decade old, and information access must keep pace with the advancements in technology. And today we see automotive professionals who are dealing with vehicle systems and components that simply just did not exist back in 2009 when CASIS was created. And contrary to what you are hearing, CASIS does not work, and it does not solve the problem for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's not enforceable. There's no legally binding enforcement mechanism in place. Second, and you mentioned, automakers are not required to participate, and some, like Tesla, do not. Third, it applies to onboard diagnostic systems, or OBD. This is the technology that's becoming outdated. And again, example, some Tesla models do not come equipped with standard OBD equipment. It doesn't apply to vehicle telematics systems, which I spoke to earlier. This is a technology that's found in 60% of vehicles worldwide, and an estimated 95% by 2030. Lastly, I would just say the agreement provides a framework for automakers to share repair information with the auto care industry on a level equivalent to that of their authorized dealers. However, some automakers have moved to direct sales models, so that's eliminating the traditional dealers altogether, along with their obligation to independent automotive shops.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to follow up with, is that all you're asking for is to be treated fairly and consistently, which has been in the past practice the norm for this country before requiring the aftermarket voluntary agreement. And so you're not asking for anything special. You're not asking for anything free. You're not asking for to be unaccountable. You just want a proper, transparent, consistent process. Is that correct?
That is correct. As per the CASIS agreement, independent auto care shops are prepared to pay commercially reasonable prices for repair information. We did see a 2019 survey of independent auto care shops across Canada. It found that just shy of 90% of respondents purchased some type of subscription. Independent shops simply just want to have the right to fix the vehicle. No one's asking for anything for free or for government handouts. They will pay for the training and the access to information. What they don't want is to have to pay a dozen different OEs for a dozen different fees. It would be more effective and efficient to have a centralized control for this information.
Yeah, and ironically, I come from the auto sector where OEMs have actually received significant public financing and support in the past, and also for the future for the innovation that we're doing. So the public is actually vested in these great operations that we do have in our country.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Geneva, 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me? Yes? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, witnesses. Very important file. It's good to see you here, Ms. Brown and Mr. Séguin. What about guarantees? This is something that I'm very interested in, because when you buy a vehicle, you have a 3, 4, 5 year guarantee. And if you decide during that period or during an extended warranty with some types of vehicle, when you go to get your vehicle repaired outside the dealer or the dealer network, what is the situation now and in the future? What will happen with that kind of a guarantee if you have a third party repair your vehicle? With original equipment manufacturer parts, because there are also non-original parts. Would the guarantee still hold? As we speak now, the certification programs are for that purpose. That there are a number of manufacturers that share the information, who will also provide information and support training, and to ensure that the vehicle is repaired according to manufacturer specifications. That's and when this is done, that's very good. And with regard to collisions, the manufacturer, a dealer, doesn't necessarily have bodywork facilities, in which case they will call on another repair shop, which might be one of our members, and there's never a problem because they always provide the manufacturer's standards and specifications with the repair shop. And I think that we have many manufacturers who work with us, provide the information we need, but unfortunately there are some that do not do that, and that causes a problem. To come back to guarantees, as long as it's repaired according to the manufacturer's specifications, the guarantee is maintained. So it continues to be valid, yes. And we know that we can go and get a repair done, and we know that now car technology is evolving so much, and they're basically computers on wheels, as we've seen. And where I go to get my car repaired is just down the block. It's only a few minutes away. It's a local mechanic who replaced his father, and he's trying to keep his garage going. And I imagine that I haven't asked him, but I imagine that he undergoes training, and the technologies that are coming up. How can you repair rolling computers when you don't have the appropriate training? I don't understand how that can be possible. How can you repair when, for example, as Mr. Miao said, now his refrigerator is a computer as well. So we're going more and more towards that kind of technology. And so if you don't have the proper training, how can you ensure that you can repair vehicles without having that information? I agree with you. I think that without the information and without the training, that's important. I think the local mechanic must have the training to be able to repair vehicles, and this training or the information should be available at a reasonable cost. And as Ms. Baker said, if we could have some kind of a more general certification program where every manufacturer would bring their tools, their equipment, and there are increasing costs, and I talked with the manufacturer who said that for collision, only about 30% of vehicles were repaired to original specifications because the programs are so excessively expensive for training. So I think if we want to control the marketing aspect, I think that we have to increase access to training and to equipment, but I think it's going to be difficult to have vehicles repaired the way they need to be. Thank you very much, Mr. Généraux. I'm sorry you don't have any more time. I'm going to have to interrupt you, Mr. Carrier. 3 minutes.
And thank you to the witnesses for making time for the committee. My question is for Mr. Drury. So you said this bill could threaten important environmental gains by circumventing embedded restrictions or unseemly engine modifications or more horsepower than what's recommended. My question is, aren't there other regulations or laws that prevent this from happening? Certainly the Copyright Act can't be the only thing standing in the way. And if someone's already violating these laws and regulations, what's this bill going to change? They're already violating it.
So you're right, they are already violating it. We just feel that this is going to make it easier and proliferate the problem.
But do you agree that there are other laws and regulations in place that prevent that from happening, correct?
Yes. And by the way, we do agree that with this rate, with some consumer products, I think that makes sense, that if you can keep these things running, phones and stuff from going to landfill, we're all about keeping those going. But in our particular industry, we are trying to keep the machine's running into a 20-year life cycle, and we need them repaired.
Great, thank you. So we know that, for example, calibration procedures for advanced driver assistance systems can be very costly on vehicles. Some Audis, for example, require an 8-hour calibration process. If we apply a cost per hour of $125, that implies a cost of over $1,000. So Mr. Massey, I think, raised that point of why are we here today? I think, wouldn't you agree that the reason we're here today is because of cost? Compared to independent repair shops, dealerships charge consumers 36% more for repairs. That's a question for the entire, for all witnesses.
Maybe if I could start, if you look at just the representation in the marketplace currently, in terms of installed market parts, the dealers have 28% of that market. The aftermarket has 59% of that market. In terms of DIY parts, the dealers have 4.5% of that market. The aftermarket has 67.6% of that market. I think if you look at just the composition of the market right now, the growth in the market, it's not an issue of whether or not there's competition out there. There's clearly competition. I think the issue or the question was posed earlier on about what are we all here for? What are we all concerned about? I think fundamentally the issue is more about the future and what's going to happen in the future and concerns about that. And I think everybody in the automotive industry shares that concern about what's going to happen in the future because technology is changing so rapidly, whether you're a manufacturer, whether you're a dealer of that manufacturer, or whether you're part of the aftermarket. But the solution is not to put in place a bill such as the one that we're talking today, which opens up not just the consumer, but society to far greater risks associated with cybersecurity, safety, and emissions, I've already mentioned.
Great. And just to reiterate, I think you already answered this question earlier, but this bill with certain modifications that address your concerns, you would support that bill?
If you can find a way that's going to address the cybersecurity concerns, the ability of and I guess let me put it another way. If the automotive aftermarket is prepared to accept all of the liability associated with those rights that you are suggesting, then that's an entirely different equation. Because right now what happens is, in a lot of cases, is vehicles will go to the aftermarket for repairs. Consumer doesn't go back to the aftermarket dealer when they have a problem with their vehicle. They go back to the manufacturer. So how do we have a record of all of the servicing on that vehicle when that information is not shared between the aftermarket and the manufacturer? So we're all for the ability of the consumer to get their vehicle repaired, but that needs to be balanced, the rights and the liabilities.
So I think OEMs have increasingly and will continue to resort to use designs and design rights to raise prices to consumers, prevent competition, and threaten the viability of the aftermarket in exterior automobile repair parts. Ms. Baker, would you agree with that statement? Do you want to expand on that?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Let me speak to the cost and affordability piece that you mentioned. We already know that Canadians are stretched with cost of living increases. I mean, you gave the statistic about dealerships charging 36% more for repairs, which I've also seen. We have multiple examples that, again, we're happy to share from consumers where an inability to service the car is resulting in increased costs. When you think about having to tow your car to a dealership, if you're in an accident in Thunder Bay and with your Tesla, for example, and you have to have it towed to Toronto, that's an increased cost. Or if you're being pushed towards higher cost OEM parts rather than aftermarket parts, as vehicle technology advances, there is a concurrent increase in the cost to service vehicles. So having the consumer choice helps Canadians to access service and repairs at a wider range of price points. And I would also add that independent shops are small business owners. They've invested their livelihoods into these shops. They're family-operated businesses. These are second and third generations, often with a fourth generation coming in. And to make it such a burden to offer a service to those within their own neighborhood who are coming in where they want to do their business, where they have been doing their business for quite some time, and where they feel comfortable, and then being told that the shop does not have the data to fix it, or they don't have the access to the technology in the vehicle, it makes their business model struggle, and it puts their business and jobs at risk. And this is a concern for the future. We know this is happening, and it's only going to grow.
Great.
Merci
Thank
beaucoup.
you.
Thank you very much.
Madame Baker. Je passerai maintenant la parole à Monsieur Lemire.
Now, Mr. Lemire, briefly. Thank you very much. In the case of an accident, the emergency services have to figure out how to disconnect batteries, and now we have vehicles that are far from the traditional type of mechanical car. And how do you address this problem in emergency situations?
I think you're absolutely right, especially with electrification. There's high voltage on the vehicle, and the first responders need to be trained to how to deal with that technology on the vehicle when they arrive. There are protocols that have been put in place by a number of different agencies to ensure that those first responders are trained when they come to the vehicle and do know how to address high voltage situations in electric vehicles.
Merci.
Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lemire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lemire. Mr. Massé.
Thank you. To Mr. Adams again, what improvements do you think could be made to cases? What's working good and what's not working so good?
Working good is that we have a mechanism in place to ensure that that information is shared with the aftermarket. I mean, each one of the CEOs at the time from the member companies signed off that they would provide that information, make that information available. I think the points that we've all made around the table are that vehicles have become more complex and will become more complex going forward. So I think the opportunity that CASIS affords is that it is a voluntary agreement, meaning that it's evolutionary and can be changed as opposed to having something legislation. Pardon me?
What changes? We're getting lots of complaints. So I'm asking out of sincerity as to what changes, because if you think it's all working perfect, then there's no reason why we'd even be here. Everything has to be. And we knew electrification and the data management stuff would be an issue. But do you actually saying that CASIS, aside from that, is working perfect and working well enough for everybody and it's consistent enough to stay the same?
I don't think I said that. I think we can always make improvements. And I think that's what we've been asking the aftermarket folks that are part of the task force with us for the last 5 or 6 meetings that we've had. Tell us specifically what is wrong, what challenges you're trying to find solutions to, and we'll gladly help work through those. Our door is open. We've maintained that we're prepared to work on the agreement.
Okay. Well, maybe what I think at some point we should bring CASIS to light. I think in the agreement that may be helpful for all of us at Parliament here to do that. Thank you very much, everyone, for your testimony. It's appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Massé, and that concludes our second hour of questioning. I want to thank all of our witnesses for joining us today. Merci beaucoup d'avoir pris du temps.
Thank you very much for having taken the time to come and testify, and thank you as well to the interpreters and the analysts and the committee staff.
you.